Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we're taking you back to an era when the world was gripped by Cold War tensions. But amid all that tension, a bizarre story unfolded. One that will make you go, wait, what? The day Pepsi, the soft drink company, became the owner of the sixth largest navy in the world. Yes, you heard that right. Pepsi didn't just have soda, it had warships, submarines, and actual military firepower. How did this happen? Why did the Soviet Union hand over a naval fleet to Pepsi? And what impact did it have on the world? Get ready for an episode packed with intriguing facts, deep dives into history, and some humor that might just make you spit out your Pepsi. The rise of Pepsi, from pharmacy shelves to the cola wars. Before we get to Pepsi's naval fleet, let's take a step back and understand how Pepsi came to be. Pepsi was created in 1898 by Caleb Bradham, a pharmacist from North Carolina. He originally formulated the drink in his pharmacy as a digestive aid, calling it Brad's Drink. Sounds like the name of a local coffee shop, right? Later, he rebranded it as Pepsi Cola, believing it could aid digestion and provide energy. Though, fun fact, the original formula didn't actually contain pepsin, an enzyme associated with digestion, as many people assume. As Pepsi grew, it became a fierce rival of Coca-Cola. The battle between these two soda giants became known as the Cola Wars, and it wasn't just about advertising. It was an all-out war for market dominance across the globe. Coca-Cola may have been around 12 years longer. It was invented in 1886, but Pepsi refused to back down. They found ways to expand their market, even in places Coca-Cola couldn't reach. And that's where today's unbelievable story begins. During the Cold War, the world was divided into two major blocs, the United States and the Soviet Union. The two superpowers competed in every possible arena, from nuclear arms and space exploration to, believe it or not, soft drinks. That's right, soda became a symbol of culture and ideology. Coca-Cola and Pepsi were seen as representations of Americanism and capitalism, something the Soviet Union was not fond of, viewing them as tools of imperialism. But in 1959, an event changed the game forever. At the American National Exhibition in Moscow, U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon met with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. The two engaged in a discussion inside a model kitchen, a debate later known as the Kitchen Debate. During their conversation, Nixon offered Khrushchev a Pepsi. Khrushchev took a sip and liked it. He reportedly said, "It's refreshing." And just like that, Pepsi became the first American soda to enter the Soviet Union, while Coca-Cola was still banned. Imagine the leader of the Soviet Union casually sipping a Pepsi in front of Nixon. It sounds like a scene straight out of a comedy movie. Following this moment, Pepsi became the first Western soft drink brand allowed to set up production in the Soviet Union in 1972. But there was one major problem. Since the Soviet economy was communist, they didn't use US dollars. That meant the Soviets couldn't pay Pepsi in cash. So how did Pepsi get their money? The answer? An old-fashioned barter system. At first, Pepsi struck a deal with the Soviet Union. They would supply soda to the USSR, and in return, the Soviets would send back Stolichnaya vodka for Pepsi to sell in the US. This agreement began in 1972, and for a while it worked perfectly. Pepsi got to sell premium vodka in America, and the Soviets got to enjoy Pepsi. Everyone was happy. But as time went on, the demand for Pepsi in the Soviet Union kept growing, and the vodka shipments were no longer enough to cover the increasing debt. Then came the peak of this incredible story in 1989. The Soviet Union was facing a severe economic crisis, and their currency was practically worthless on the global market. Pepsi started to worry. How are we going to get paid now? That's when the Soviets made an offer that was absolutely mind-blowing. They said, "We don't have cash, but we do have some old military ships lying around. Want them?" And Pepsi said yes. As a result, Pepsi acquired 17 naval vessels, including one submarine, one cruiser, one destroyer, and several frigates, all in exchange for $3 billion worth of soda. Just picture it. A soda company, with its iconic red, white, and blue logo, suddenly owned the sixth largest navy in the world overnight. If Pepsi had wanted to go to war with Coca-Cola at that moment, they would have won hands down. Coke had commercials, but Pepsi had warships. But don't worry, Pepsi didn't keep its Navy for long. They quickly sold all the ships to a Swedish recycling company. Pepsi's CEO at the time, Don Kendall, famously said, "We're better at selling soda than playing war." Smart move. If I were CEO, though, I might have kept at least one submarine, just for some underwater sightseeing. Why did the Soviet Union allow Pepsi to own a naval fleet? The answer lies in the Cold War context and the economic crisis of the late 1980s. By that time, the Soviet Union was in dire straits. Its economy had collapsed due to the arms race with the US and years of mismanagement. The Soviet ruble was practically worthless in global markets, and they needed a way to pay off debts to Western companies like Pepsi. The warships given to Pepsi were old, decommissioned vessels, most of them dating back to World War II. The Soviets had stopped maintaining them because their budget was drained by nuclear weapons programs and space exploration. In a way, handing over these ships to Pepsi was like taking out the trash, getting rid of military assets they no longer needed. But for Pepsi, this was a golden opportunity. Even if the ships were outdated, they could still be sold for scrap metal at a good price. Another interesting angle is that Pepsi's presence in the Soviet Union was part of a larger political shift. Under Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost policy, which encouraged openness to the West, the USSR was slowly embracing capitalist elements, and Pepsi became a symbol of that change. It may have been just a soft drink, but politically it signified a turning point. And just 2 years after this deal, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, making Pepsi an unexpected part of history. How did this deal affect Pepsi? First and foremost, Pepsi dominated the Soviet soft drink market, while Coca-Cola struggled to catch up. By the early 1990s, Pepsi's factories in the Soviet Union were producing over 1 billion bottles per year. Even after the USSR collapsed, Pepsi remained one of the most popular brands in Russia, a lasting symbol of American capitalism in a country that once fiercely opposed it. From a financial standpoint, Pepsi profited by selling the Soviet warships to a recycling company. While it wasn't a massive windfall, it allowed them to recoup losses from a country that was essentially bankrupt. More importantly, this deal became a global sensation. A story so outrageous and unexpected that it cemented Pepsi's reputation as a bold, unconventional brand willing to think outside the box. However, there's also a darker side to this deal. Some critics argue that Pepsi was profiting from the Soviet Union's downfall. While Soviet citizens faced poverty and food shortages, Pepsi was still pushing for repayment, even if it meant accepting warships in exchange for soda. To some, this felt like taking advantage of a nation in crisis. Beyond just business, this deal also highlights the inequalities of capitalism. While the Soviets had to trade military assets just to get soft drinks, Pepsi walked away with money and global recognition. It raises a bigger question. In a world where power and wealth dictate everything, even a soda company can become a key player in global politics. What if Pepsi had kept the Navy? Let's imagine for fun. What if Pepsi had decided to keep the Navy? Maybe we'd see a Pepsi warship with its signature red, white, and blue logo floating across the oceans. Or maybe Pepsi would use its submarine fleet to secretly deliver soda to customers. Imagine a submarine rising from the depths and firing cans of Pepsi instead of torpedoes. And if Pepsi had actually gone to war with Coca-Cola, I bet Coca-Cola would have asked Starbucks to send coffee as their weapon. An all-out dark soda war would have been intense. What's the lesson from this deal? So, what does Pepsi's story and its Navy teach us? First, it shows that in the world of capitalism, nothing is impossible. Even a soda company can own a Navy. Second, it reflects the power of branding. Pepsi wasn't just selling soda, they were selling the American dream to Soviet citizens. And finally, it reminds us that in the world of global politics and business, sometimes what looks like a joke might hide a dark and complex truth underneath. That's all for today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from the wow-worthy story of Pepsi and the Navy. If you liked this episode, don't forget to follow and send me any quirky ideas you want me to talk about. See you next time. Goodbye.